Mr. Mack-Poole, 3-minute history, causes of poverty in Elizabethan England. Let's do this. In Elizabethan England between 1558 and 1588, there were many reasons for a rise in poverty. Now, the Elizabethans didn't understand why poverty rose. They didn't have the statistical methods that we have today, computers, economists, who can measure the reasons for a rise in poverty. They didn't understand what was driving it. Now let me get to the causes of the rise in poverty in Elizabethan England. One big reason was a rise in population size. In Elizabethan England, the population size rose by 25%. One reason for this was because of good harvests. This did come to an end, which caused a problem. If you have a lot of people being born, and then you have a greater demand for food, well, if harvests become poor later on, that creates a lot of poverty. Now there were external reasons for this too. One was the collapse in the cloth trade. Spain had been buying lots of English cloth, but because England and Spain now had poor relations, with many privateers stealing the goods of Spanish ships, Spain essentially put sanctions on English goods and refused to buy our cloth. This increased poverty in England. Another big reason was because of the attitudes towards the poor. Elizabethans simply believed that a lot of people, the undeserving poor, were poor because they were lazy. Attitudes like this still exist today. However, they did believe that they were a deserving poor, people that were poor through no fault of their own, and believed that they deserved help. A huge reason for the increase in poverty was because of the enclosure of land. Now this was really greedy. This was basically rich people closing off common land which poorer farmers had used to grow private crops or let a few animals which they owned graze. This land was grabbed by the rich so they could use it for their own farming. This made poor people poorer and rich people richer. Another reason for poverty was an increase in sheep farming. Now, because of poor harvests, a lot of farmers didn't grow wheat. Instead, they farmed sheep, which would then, their manure would then fertilise the ground. Whilst this was good for them, it put a strain on the amount of wheat produced by farmers, which meant there was less bread for an already impoverished nation. Another reason for the increase in poverty was poor harvests. If you've got poor harvests, you have less food. This drives the price of food up. Now, it wasn't like Elizabeth did nothing and just sat on her hands. She did try and solve these issues. Her first act, the Vagabondage Act of 1572, was punitive. It punished people for being poor. She would, have, for instance, put a hole through poor beggars' ears. Not personally, she administered people to do it. However, that didn't stop people from being poor and hungry. So she decided in 1576 to introduce the Poor Relief Act. So this used justice of the peace to give materials, goods, equip poor people with skills so they would no longer be poor and could start to trade. However, despite the fact that she passed both of these acts, poverty remained a problem in Elizabethan England.